Hi, this tutorial will explain how to customize the ECP Editor. We've already seen the ECP Editor in the previous tutorial on how to set up the EMF client platform. I will just quickly show you again what the ECP Editor is and what kind of functionality it can perform. If we open up an existing project and we just double click one of the entities, this will bring up the ECP Editor, and in this editor all the attributes of the respective model element are being rendered. So for the writer, that is the name and an email address and a date of birth and so on. And what you can do in the editor is you can delete this entity, you can create links to the respective other elements. You can set the different information, for example here is the date of birth, or here this name. And let's look at the book, for example. You can see it's already linked to a writer. You can of course remove links and link to an existing writer, or you can link to a new writer that you just create by creating that link. And now you can see that there is a new writer as well, and it's being linked to the book, and the book is linked to the editor, so you can even follow links. So that is the kind of the functionality that the editor offers you. It's a reflective editor that will reflectively look at the attributes and references that your model elements have, and it will render widgets for each of these attributes. So a widget, for example, is here for the name attribute. We have a widget that is just a text field, while for the book reference we have a widget which allows you to display multiple links. So for example, I could here create with the plus button a new additional book, and then if I go back to the writer, I'll see it can also contain multiple books in that list. Now if we want to customize this editor, for example change some of the widgets for the attributes, or for example change just the order of the widgets and things like that, that is what we're going to do now in this tutorial. So I'm going to close this instance, and I've already prepared this other plugin. We have already installed that in the tutorial how to set up the EMF client platform. So if you don't have that, then just watch this tutorial. And if we go to this plugin editor customizations and open up the plugin XML, we can see which extension points we used. So the first extension point that I want to introduce is the attribute control extension point. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to replace one of the controls or widgets for an attribute. So in this case I'm registering a widget with a certain name, which is not very important, and I register it for a certain type, in this case a string. So remember that all the attributes that you have in your eCore have a certain type, even the reference have, and you just add this type here so that the ECP editor knows for which type you want to register this this control. So in my case I want to register it for just a string attribute, and then I have to give it a class which actually implements this control. So let's have a look at the class. What the class does is it will extend METext control, which is an existing control that we have. And I have just extended this METext control, and basically all these controls, they have to implement two methods. That is, one method can render and the other method create control. The can render method will be called by the ECP framework in order to determine whether this specific control wants to be responsible for a certain e-object. And for each of these e-objects it gets an item property descriptor and the e-object itself. So in my case what I'm doing is I'm going to have a look at the feature that is being rendered here. I can get the feature from the item property descriptor, and the feature, if it is the feature get writer email, so if it's the writer email feature, then I return 2, which is a priority for me to render. And use priorities here because you could of course register different controls for one and the same feature, for example, with the same condition, and then by priority it is decided which of the controls will show. And in all other cases, so in case the feature that we look at is not the writer email, then I will just return do not render, which means I can't render this and I don't want to render this attribute. And then finally, if I have returned a valid value here, so something that is not do not render, and if I'm the control with the highest priority, then the framework will call create control, and this is the part which will create the UI for this attribute. And in this case, the only thing I'm doing is I'm adding here a text field with a button, and if I push this send mail button, then my mail application is going to open with the email address that is in this field. And we can have a look at that. It's already registered. So if I now bring up the ECP application again and we look at the editor, then we will see this control. Now we'll open up one of the entities. So in our case with the writer. And we can see that the writer has this email widget here and has a send mail button, and if I just enter an email address here, and I click on send mail, then it'll bring up my mail program with that email address. Now you might ask, okay, how did that look like before the customization? Of course, and we can do that. And I will just, for that purpose, unregister that widget, and then we can see what happened here. So I'll remove that customization and I'll relaunch the ECP application. Now if I open up the writer again, we can see now that email is just a normal text field and doesn't have any send mail button anymore. This normal text field, by the way, because we have now not registered any widget, is the default widget for any text field. So if ECP can't pick up any control that you registered for this specific attribute, then it will just display a default widget. For example, here for date of birth, it will display a date widget. Now I'll close this application again and go back to our Eclipse instance, and we will have a look at additional extension points. Another extension point that we could use is the pages customization. And the pages customization basically adds an additional page to the editor. I will show you that in a minute. The only thing we have to do for that is create this extension point, or in the case Editor, and then pages, and then associate a class with that. We can also associate after which other page this page should occur. We don't do that right now, and if we have a look at the class, it will just open up an empty Editor form page. And yeah, looking at the editor, what does that do? We'll just launch it and show you quick. If we look at the model element, at any model element more closely, we can see here that we have the page standard view and we have a custom page, which is the second page that we just added by the extension point. Now finally, in terms of the attributes, what we can also do is the default order of the attribute is just the order that you have in your eCore. So if we, for example, look at the writer, we see that name was a topmost attribute, and then there is books and so on. Of course, you can also influence the order other than just ordering it in the eCore file. So if we, for example, have a look at the books attributes, it was on the right side. And that is because it had an annotation. The annotation has to have as a source or unicase UI Editor, and then it has two subnodes, so details entry, and one of them is position, and it can have the values right, left, or bottom. So in this case we had the value right, and that was the reason why the books reference was rendered on the right hand side of the Editor. And it can have a priority. Now the priority decides where this element is. Lower priority means it's more to the top of the editor. So in the order of the priority, these attributes are being rendered. So in our case, the book is, since it's the only thing on the right hand side, it's the topmost entry on the right hand side of the editor. And for the other entries, we didn't have any of these annotations, so they are just rendered by default, and the default order is on the left-hand side and in the order that they have in the eCore. So for example, if I now move up the email here, and then I change this annotation of the book, and instead of position right, I say position is bottom, and I save that, and then I will just regenerate my code. And my edit code, and then launch the EMFCP application. I will see these changes. Now I will open up the writer again, and I can see that the books are on the bottom now, and these attributes have changed order, so now email is on top and name is below that. Okay, so this tutorial has shown you how to customize the ECP Editor. So you have seen how to change the order of attributes, how to replace widgets or controls for attributes or references, and how to influence also the position of the of these widgets and controls, and how to add custom pages if you need any additional pages. Now, if you obviously, I think this is a good start for an application, and you can work with that. But of course, you can replace the whole editor if you want to have your own custom editor, and you can of course also do that selectively only for certain elements. So, for example, you can only replace it for a book and have a certain editor that is only working with the book. The EMF Client platform makes that very easy and supplies a default implementation, which is the editor that we have just seen, but you can also plug in other editors, such as, for example, the Red Video editor. And we will show that in the upcoming tutorial, how to customize the navigator, because the navigator offers this functionality to replace an editor for a certain model element type. Okay, thank you and have fun. Bye-bye.